With a thirst on verse, it'll quench your thirst. Three fly ass chicks ready to converse. Something's on our mind and we need to get it off. So I'm gonna stop with the rhyme and get straight to the talk. So sit back, buckle up, and ease your fears, cause it's the first of the month and the thirds are here.
The thirds are here.
Hey, ladies.
Hey.
Oh, the one. We didn't know you had secret rap skills, girl.
I mean, fire. Really?
I don't understand why you waste your time practicing law, really. I mean, we already said this last time, but like Beyonce, you need to holler at.
Please call her like this. That's a bucket list item.
Yeah. So hot. Totally fine.
So hot.
Loved it.
Just message me for my number. I'll give you all my info. Beyonce only.
Not anybody else, just Beyonce.
For people.
I love it. It's so good to see y'all. I've missed you. How's it going?
It's great to be back. It's hard to believe it's already the first of the month. It's Thursday.
Thursday. It's definitely my favorite day, like permanently these days.
That's right.
It's all good stuff. I feel like people know us, but we have never revealed like our identities. So maybe we should do that today.
Yeah. Our
all right.
Secret identities.
Let's reveal our secret identities. We should start with the rapper of the group.
Me?
Yes.
Well, I am 3/3, aka the one, and my first name is Ashante. This mask is off.
And I am 2/3. My true identity is Nicole is my name. Some people call me Nick, Nikki, Nicole.
Nikki Dangerous.
Some people just call me Dangerous. Some people call me Drop. There are stories inappropriate for right now.
Did I ever tell you like I tried to make my middle name Nicole?
No. So you're saying
I wanted my first name to be Nicole. I think that is part of our thirdness. So
I do
no
love
one could say Ashante. So
I do love my name.
Yeah.
Good one.
I am 1/3. My real name is Rashida, aka Sheeta, only to the people that are closest to me.
Yeah, Sheeta.
That didn't feel right, did it?
You're always 1/3 to me.
I'm always 1/3.
Like, I think people think like that's not actually what we call each other, but it is.
No,
it is. Like, that's really how we talk to each other.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's all good. So now you guys know who we really are. Like we have real names, although we don't use them with each other, but other people use them. So
right.
Go figure. There you go. So ladies, this week we're going to dive in. I want to play a clip because I've been seeing this quote around a lot on the internet. And I think it's important to hear it, but I also think it's important to hear it in context and for our conversation today. So let me see if I can hit this for us real quick.
Sweet.
The most disrespected person in America is the black woman. The most unprotected person in America is the black woman. The most neglected person in America is the black woman. And as Muslims, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us to respect our women and to protect our women. And the only time a Muslim really gets real violent is when someone goes to molest his woman. We will kill you for our woman. I'm making it plain, yes. We will kill you for our woman. We believe that if the white man will do whatever is necessary to see that his woman gets respect and protection, then you and I will never be recognized as men until we stand up like men and place the same penalty over the head of anyone who puts his filthy hands out to put in the direction of our women.
All right. We are all black women, but I think we think about it in different ways. One of the things that jumped out for me when I heard that, because I honestly had never heard the quote in full context. And so when I heard it in full context, like I'm always like, yes, we are highly disrespected, like we are not protected. And then hearing Malcolm X talk about it in context of what almost felt like ownership to me, like it didn't change the accuracy of the quote, but it gave a different context for me of like, when do we get to be recognized just because we're Black women? Like outside of the context of patriarchy and other people's perspectives. Because for me, I'm Black. I always feel like I'm Black first. But I don't really want to choose. Like that's the challenge with intersectionality, is you're always feeling like you're choosing. But why do you have to? Kind of thing. Like, what do you guys think and feel when you heard that quote?
So for me, I think it's a superlative that I don't want to be true, but I also don't want to put on any other group, right? Like no one wants to be the most disrespected or the most unprotected. And I think certainly on both sides of the intersection, there are individual women, regardless of race, who will say they have felt disrespected and unprotected. And there are men, including Black men, who will say the same thing. But as much as I don't want the quote to be true, I think there is definitely something to it. I think the intersection of our gender identity and our race provides a double exposure to Black women, other Indigenous women, and other women of color. But I think there is still a nuance for Black women that certainly subjects us to more trauma. So both personal trauma, both public trauma via race, and in isolated incidents, so you think, or in chronic ones, like, so you might have an incident of sexual assault or chronic domestic violence. And these are things that women deal with more, disparately than men do. But then on the same side, you have the same chronic racial traumas that men encounter. Mm-hmm. And so I think, there definitely is something about that intersection. And I think with the other piece of the quote, you talked about it coming from a ownership perspective. And I see that there's certainly a way for that to be, feeding into the patriarchy and creating a hierarchical system where women are subject to men. But I also think that there should be an ownership to each other and a means of partnership. Whereas I think oftentimes we see Black women leading charges for the Black community, or also leading charges for our needs as women, but we don't always get that same support. I think because we talk about raising Black girls to be independent, and I think we oftentimes raise Black boys to survive because we're afraid of them not making it home. But for Black women, we're afraid of us being abandoned by a man or not marrying or not having that kind of support. So we need to be independent, and there's a bit of a mismatch there. And I think we need to start looking at each other as partners and having each other's back. And I think Black women will oftentimes come to the aid of anyone that's in danger, male or female, because we stand at that intersection and we can see everything that's happening. Anything that's a threat to us, when we see it happening to someone else, we are sort of willing to step in by and large. I think when you're on one side of the intersection or the other, you're more focused on your particular issue and don't necessarily step in when there's something that doesn't affect you. I mean, and I think from the Black male perspective, I think Malcolm X was making a call to Black men to step up and protect Black women, and using the model of white men protecting their wives as an example. And I think so often, I mean, rightly or wrongly, the Black community is using the success of the white community as what we're trying to attain. Like, so instead of breaking down the patriarchy or breaking down systemic racism, we're trying to succeed within that model.
Yes, yeah.
And I think, I think he's definitely using that context. Like, okay, well, this is what is happening on this side. We need to be doing the same thing for our women. And it doesn't always happen. I mean, I think a lot of times, because we deal with traumas that we survive and that you can often hide and keep in silence, there is this expectation that we will thrive in that and we will do so silently, right? But because, we have this resilience, when we speak up, it's often dismissed. And I think, folks expect us to step in the way that we have historically done, to step in to kind of be these superwomen, these saviors who will help everyone. But when we say we need something, our needs are often treated as being optional.
Yeah.
So just, we'll get around to that if there are enough resources. But hey, there's this problem. Why don't you go in and clean that up?
Right. But it's like a cleanup it's almost like the cleanup is expected to be on the back end. Like, I think about the examples of the mayor of San Francisco, the mayor of Atlanta, and there was one other Black female mayor that when COVID hit, they went into leadership mode, right? They were like, okay, we're doing this, we're locking everything down, we are playing no games. And they immediately saw impact in that. Mm-hmm. And I remember a lot of the language in my circles was trust Black women, because again, we can solve the problems. But then over time, it's like that happened for a little bit and then it's been sort of dismissed. It's like, we want you to solve the problems, but I need you to stay in the background. Mm-hmm. And I'm not elevating what you bring to the table, right? And the value that you bring to the table doesn't get elevated because it's like, I just need you to be over here.
It's a little bit of an elevated version of mammy.
You took the words right out of my mouth, which is, this is the modern day version of being a mammy, right? It's like, we are the nurturers, we are the protectors, we are the caregivers, we are the ones who set things right, but we are to be invisible. Mm-hmm. And we are to be at all times strong, but never angry. And oh, by the way, the only emotion that we ever have is anger or a non-emotion. We are not viewed as complex, emotional beings who are capable of the full range of human feeling. Mm-hmm. And, that's traceable back to the slave trade and, experimentation on women's bodies and using their bodies for the nursing of white children, and that we, supposedly cannot experience pain the same as white women. So, there's so much to unpack in that. And, I kind of wonder how much is, there are systems and then there's this unconscious bias. And, for you all, how have you sort of, for me, it's always microaggressions, but, when you're thinking about this intersectionality and how you've dealt with the world, how do you feel like you've been perceived personally as a Black woman operating in a professional world?
I know for me, I went through this evolution as we all do in our careers, right? And so I remember early on, I took on what I think many of us do when we first start our careers, right? I'm going to go in, I'm going to do my work, and like this misguided notion that I'm going to be recognized for being great. And I'm going to be heads down and like just get what needs to be done. And what happened was I was viewed as, not part of the team. And I was viewed as, not trying to engage and not building relationships. And I didn't understand at that time the value of everything, the currency in life, quite frankly, but definitely in a professional setting, is relationships. That is how you navigate. That is how you move. You can be fantastic, but if nobody knows it, quite frankly. And my perspective at the time was, I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to do what I've trained to do. But it hurt me. And I was, kind of looked at as hostile and not engaging and not approachable. And sometimes my facial expressions don't help. So like, oh my gosh, so shocking. And then I learned how to navigate. I had to navigate through a period of what I call the fakeness, right? Because then you're like, okay, well, I'll go play the game. Exactly.
We wear the mask pre-COVID, so
we wear the mask, Paul Lawrence Dunbar, right? Like, I hated it, but I recognized that that's what I had to do to get to where I needed to be. And then I found a space where it was truly genuine. And when I settled into that space, it was at the same time that I started to understand how to fully be I won't say fully, let me reverse that. How to mostly be myself, and be authentic and be as transparent as I was comfortable being in a workplace, and still not be a threat, because that's what it boils down to. It boils down to whether people perceive you as a threat or not.
But that's where the angry Black woman comes in, right? Because if that's all you're perceived as being able to be is angry, which I think is a huge misperception.
Yeah.
Then people fear anger. They see it as a threat and a danger. Mm-hmm. So then we are a threat and we are a danger. And really, I think the danger is we're going to make you uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's real. And it's rooted in a bias, because if I am talking forcefully like this in a meeting and you view that as angry, but Todd does this, Todd is passionate.
Right. And he gets respect for that.
Respected. Mm-hmm. They love that. Mm-hmm. But I can't do that. Mm-hmm. And what I always question is that because I'm a woman, or is that because I'm Black?
Ooh,
or is it both?
It's both. Again, the intersection.
Well, and two, this is gonna feel like I'm switching gears, but I don't mean to, but I do wanna be transparent in this podcast at all times. But in this discussion, I had to really think a lot about. So intersectionality for me is not only just, my gender, but just within my race. I have a white mother, and I had to really sort of think about, maybe privilege is not this binary situation, right? You have it or you don't. Mm-hmm. There are some have more and some have less. Mm-hmm. And I know that my experiences in the world in general, in my family, in my romantic relationships, in my professional spheres, in educational spheres, I am absolutely certain that my experiences have not been the same as my dark-skinned dark Black sisters. I know it hasn't been. And so I've had to kind of be asking myself, going through this, like, do I get away with more? And another Black woman would, because I have long straight hair and light skin and speak the King's English, and you guys too. You know, so do we sit here sort of in a seat of privilege in a way, where we can't do everything Todd can do, but we can do some of the things Todd can do that maybe somebody else can't do any of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think that's a like, I think about it a lot. When I think about and talk about privilege, I recognize that I walk in I walk in privilege. I grew up in a upper middle class neighborhood. I went to public schools, but I went to like the best public schools. I went to a top university. I went to a top 10 law school. Like all of those things, you know, socioeconomically doing well, like all of those things lend a level of privilege that I walk in, and then therefore my child walks in. Mm-hmm. And it's an interesting thing, because being a Black woman and recognizing your privilege does not take on the same level of what I perceive to be threat that I hear when you say the word privilege to a white male, as an example. Mm. Like there is a high level of offense that comes with that. Mm-hmm.
On their part.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's not at least for me personally, I don't carry it as I did this, but I also don't feel the need to shrink myself because of it. Because my grandparents worked, you know, my great-grandparents worked to create that. My grandparents worked to create that. My parents did as well. And then I, of course, did the work. But I had this conversation with my grandmother last week. She's 90. And she was just talking about like how proud she was to see each of the generations, because she is seen through her great-grandchildren. She's got grown great-grandchildren now, of like, each generation has done better than the next, and that's always the goal. And so I feel like, generally speaking, there's a societal expectation of you should, and sometimes it's cultural, let's be honest, of you shouldn't be all the way wherever you are, and you shouldn't have a level of privilege, and it exists. And the point is to make everybody better.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The point is not for just me to be better, just us to be better. The point is, how do we bring us all along? And if we don't do that, then yeah, maybe you should check yourself, because like, where's your heart is my question. But it just, I don't know, for me, like it doesn't set the same way. Like I'm not offended by it. I'm proud of it, but I don't flaunt it either.
Well, I would dare say part of the reason why it doesn't hit as much is because you're already aware of it. Like, yes, colorism is a thing, right? It happens, but I recognize it. I don't ascribe to it, right? Mm-hmm. But because I recognize that there are folks who are looking at me and might treat me better than someone else who is darker skinned, and I might end up at a table or with a seat that enables me to speak on that person's behalf, I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that privilege to help, right? Like, I'm aware that it exists. I don't want to get into like, yes, like there are times where I have been questioned about like, you know, well, what are you? Don't say you're Black, right? Like, you know, so And there's a lot with intersectionality, period, about that's like both an invisibility and a hyper visibility, right? And so we don't have to get into like trying to quantify our pain. It's just like, I recognize it happens. Yeah. And I don't want to, you know, get into a debate with someone about, well, no, like this happened to me too. And I'm Black and like, no, like I'm Black, I'm a woman, I've experienced things, but I also recognize that I am Black in America and colorism exists. Mm-hmm. And I am willing to use my privilege to help other people who might not have that same privilege. That also applies socioeconomically, that also applies on the educational front. But I think that kind of goes back to something Nicole was saying earlier about, you know, Black women having these nurturing qualities and wanting to help others. I mean, I think it's like recognizing that we are not in this alone, and it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game, mm-hmm. which is very much part of what America has been built on, this capitalistic notion that, there are finite resources and we have, if I don't have it all, then I don't, I haven't won. And so I think
somebody's got my stuff. Like I have to take back from you
right.
because you took something from me.
Right. And so I tend to move in a very different way that, like there really are enough resources for us.
For everybody.
We might have to redistribute some things, but we can get to where we need to be. And I think there really is, it does require being conscious and being aware. I mean, and frankly, like going back to the white privilege piece, when you're talking about a white male having a very visceral reaction to being told that he's privileged. And I think that's really all people of color are asking, like acknowledge the privilege and use it to help those of us who don't have it. Mm-hmm. We're not faulting you for having it. Like you didn't ask to be born, into where you are in society. Like these are the cards we're all dealt. It's then what do we do with it for the good, as opposed to continuing to perpetuate the cycle.
Right.
But white people grow up with their orientation in the world as being normative. Like white is just the non-race, right? Like that's the baseline. That's the standard against which everything is measured. And they even will, I think, most white folks these days will acknowledge and say, yes, there are groups in our society who are disadvantaged and who lack privilege, but they are not able to, to underscore your point, Ashante, they're not able to appreciate that there's a corollary to the lack of privilege of one group and the existence of privilege in another, and the fact that there are advantages that you are going to have that did not come because you worked hard. And nobody's saying you didn't work hard. Mm-hmm. Guess what? You got more for that hard work than I will.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's I think I was telling you guys before we started recording that I was listening to the 1619 Project this morning on the podcast, and they were talking about Lincoln and the Emancipation Proclamation. And one of the things that they shared that I was not aware of was this meeting that he had with 4 abolitionists. And so this is before the emancipation happened. And the question, at that point, there were something like 4 million slaves, I think was the number. And the question that was kind of looming was, what do we do with these people once they're free? Like, what does that mean? And so they brought these 4 abolitionists to meet with him to talk about that. But they get there, and there's this new head of immigration with an E. And it was a newly created role. And the proposal was, we send them to other countries. And it's rooted in what you just said, which is a discomfort. And so it was to create comfort for who we really believe this country is for, which is white men, not even white women, not white people, but white men. We're gonna let you free, but you've got to go. Yeah. Like you need to leave.
There's no space for you.
And at that point, you're talking about asking people who were born here to leave their home. Like you've already kidnapped us from one home. Brought us here. Nobody asked to be here. And then you're like, okay, we're kind of done with you. So I don't care where you go, just not here. And that perpetuates throughout the history of this country of it is we as a people are in a constant state of discomfort. If you think about it, when are we most comfortable with one another? And that's not an argument for or against segregation or anything like that, right? It's just you're comfortable around people that identify with you. That is human nature and that is human behavior. But the majority of our lives are not lived in a bubble. And so we are in a constant state of discomfort. And I think given the push for social justice that is happening right now in a very real way, what we are saying to folks and what we are saying when we say recognize your privilege is get a little uncomfortable because we live in a constant state of discomfort. So if you could just for a moment get uncomfortable, and maybe we can all get to a place where we can live with a little discomfort, but there's not one group or a certain set of groups that are in a constant state of discomfort. Right. Like that's the part that's not okay, because that's the part that then creates you're in your bubble and you're happy and you're doing what you're doing and we are still struggling to get there. But if we can all push together, everybody's going to be uncomfortable at one point or another, but it's not such a gap in that.
Well, thinking about that discomfort, a few weeks ago, I was watching a webinar with Navy SEALs who were giving advice on how to take their experiences from missions and team building to discuss ways to navigate uncertainty with COVID and just ways to build strong teams, period. And some of them went in and talked about actual wartime experiences, actual missions that they went on, and some of their PTSD type experiences. And it was interesting to me, it was all white men, but I'd never identified with a white man more than hearing their experiences.
Wow.
And I realized there was something about being a Black woman that had that constant layer of discomfort that you're talking about, but the pressure from both sides. And there were ways that they were talking about being authentic, being vulnerable. This is how they built teams. And I was like, no, these are the things that I feel like I push for professionally to build the kind of environment that I think would be most comfortable for the majority of us. Like, it's going to require, some redistribution of comfort and discomfort, but I think by and large, it's what I perceive to be better for the whole. Mm-hmm. And so it was really interesting. And I thought, I was like, wow, like, to get to this point, like, I'm just living my day-to-day life as a civilian, but I most identify with these men who are going out, they're the elite of our military. And I was like, why is that? And I do think that there is the pressure on both sides, like Black women are more at risk. That, we suffer the same types of trauma as white women and as Black men, but just at higher rates on both sides. Mm-hmm. And the resilience we've had to get through that has sort of turned us into this, elite warriors. So when you say things like, listen to Black women, like, it's rooted in so much truth. And part of that is because, like, we have so much at stake that we are very clear on what we need and what we want. Yet our vote is expected. It's not courted, right? Like, it's just like, oh, yes, Black women vote as a block. Like, very clearly, we look at the last presidential election, Black women knew what we wanted.
Right.
Folks didn't listen, but we were a very clear voting block. that was taken for granted. Like, no, like, why are we not out being wooed? Why are we not really being listened to?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how many times does it have to be demonstrated that there is something to this? And I do think it's because, like, going back to the visibility and the invisibility and the hypervisibility, like, when you know that there are threats looming all around and you know that you stand out, like, we are othered from the standard of woman equaling white woman and Black equaling Black man.
Yeah.
So we jut out in both of those categories, and we know that, and we are able to navigate both worlds. But as a result, we know, we see all the issues on both sides. And I think that just, if folks would listen to our experiences and listen to all the things that we see that maybe they don't, I think we could make a lot of advances in a lot of ways. And it's not just that we have the magic cure, it's just that maybe we really do see threats that you don't see. Maybe that gives us something that looks like foresight because we have to be aware of it in order to survive.
Yeah.
I would love to, to sort of continue that line of thought. I'm sitting here thinking sort of on an individual micro level, just kind of thinking about that notion of always being in sort of a state of discomfort as a Black woman in America, and how that relates to this notion of invincibility, the Superwoman Syndrome, always being strong, always having to be the nurturers and caregivers. Like, what if we want to, have some tiny little influence in our small little corner of the world, like, what do you all do either to cope with that situation or to affirmatively combat it and try to change it? So that, I mean, it's hard to be everything to everybody all the time, and to have, way back to the top, what Rashida said, it's like, your identity and your existence is always as it relates to some other person. It's, how, to your children or your husband or your boss, or it's always what you need to somebody else, or just you as a valid on your own. So how do we deal?
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think we, again, have to acknowledge that and start consciously breaking that cycle. I mean, I've been thinking about, like, Black girl magic and Black boy joy, right? And I love both of them, but it's interesting when we say, like, there's Black girl magic, it's almost like it's not real, right? Like, that's magic and this is reality. And you do, go sprinkle your fairy dust. but in reality, I'm like, no, like, yeah, you see it, you respect it, but something about it still doesn't feel real or feel true. And I think we have to just acknowledge, like, no, like, it's not just magic, it's my life. Like, listen to me. It's not some fantastical thing that you can just set aside. It's not for entertainment. Like, this is my real life, and I need, I need that to be taken seriously. And I think it does start by us being willing to repeatedly say, no, I need this, I need these resources, I need to take this break, I need to kill Superwoman, I need, like, to be honest and to recognize, like, what labels have been put on us that aren't really are doing, like the notion that you can't cry. Like, no, there have been times where I've been doing something hard and I've been doing it with tears in my eyes. Like, I will do them both at the same time, but you're not going to force me to choose, right? Like, you can't convince me that I can't have feelings, that I can't have emotions, because I very much do. And, I think, we have to have somewhere where we can lay it down. where we can just be ourselves.
It's interesting you mentioned those. I can't stand the black girl magic thing, like, because of exactly what you said, right? In my mind, am I a unicorn? Absolutely. Like, I love unicorns, it's my thing. But we are real people. What we do is not magical. It is hard work and it is real life. And I think that is the critical part. For me, setting boundaries. So like that book, Boundaries by Cloud and Townsend, was a game changer for me. Just understanding how to create boundaries in my life and say no. And we talked about essentialism last time, and you talked about the, like, if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. Like, period. And getting to, and it takes time and it takes courage to be able to do that. But that is the only way that I can navigate. But the other way that I navigate life is through community. It is through these relationships. It is through my other relationships that I lean on other women. How are you doing this? How did you do this? Like, because I can't do it by myself. None of us can, and none of us should. And yet this whole Superwoman syndrome is I mean, like, it's a psychological official term, and it is really rooted in suppressing your emotions, being everything to everybody, always showing strength, always having solutions. But it comes at such a cost. Like, there is a physical exhaustion, there's a mental exhaustion, there's an emotional exhaustion. It costs you your mental health, it costs you your physical health, and it costs relationships, and none of that is worth it. And so I did, and I don't remember if I talked about this in another episode or not, but like, I recentered. When I left corporate and decided to do my own thing, I decided to do it with a different lens. So all of this year, despite all the 2020 craziness, has been about the recentering. And my recentering was recognizing that work was the center of what I was doing without me even realizing it. And I was fitting the things that matter most: myself, my family, my child, like my friends. I was making it fit around work. And that's not the life I want to live at all. And so my recentering was, I will center myself and my daughter first, and the things that we value, the things that are important to us, and then I will fit everything else around that. And some days I get it right, and some days I don't. But I try to true back to that, and that is how I make decisions now, of like yes and no. And it's made a huge impact. And have I passed up things that sounded really cool? Yep. Because it didn't make sense and it didn't work. And it's like, I know you want me to do that. And it sounds like something I would want to do, but that doesn't fit with the life that we have. Because what's important to me is that this kid and I have a few hours of downtime. What's important together. What's important to me is that I be able to disconnect and not go at a breakneck speed all the time. Because sometimes I just want to sit on the couch and watch Netflix and doze off. And that's okay.
No.
But it's the boundaries, and it is the understanding your core values and making decisions aligned with your boundaries and your values.
So a couple of things occurred from what you guys said to me. One is freeing ourselves from the burden of feeling like the fact that we have the privilege mandates that every decision we make must be a decision that sort of, amplifies the look how far we've come message, meaning you've got to, for me, gotta try to be a GC somewhere so that we can show, you know, just how great and that I'm some sort of representative for everybody who is Black, and trying to, you know, sort of earn the privilege and the opportunities that you have, somehow living a life that earns those things, when it is so important to make personal choices and to not always feel the weight of not just the people coming behind you, but even the shoulders on which you stand. I mean, sometimes you still have to make a personal choice. And, you know, for me, I had, you know, the privilege of a lifetime. Almost 10 years ago, I became a mother, and I'm a mother of 2 girls. And you quickly realize that these girls, these children, they watch you, and they watch what you do, and they watch how you live. And so I think being a parent has made me far more deliberate about the choices that I make and the behavior that I model for them. And I also have the great privilege of being married to a wonderful man, a wonderful Black man who, you know, he's right. We are side by side, shoulder to shoulder in this life. And so when you talk about laying it down, we lay it down for each other. Like, you know, this is our sanctum, when we are at home, this is our safe place. This is where you can take off the armor and you can just be vulnerable, and express whatever emotions you're feeling and be accepted and not judged, and not have to worry about, like, are you going to offend somebody, or are you doing the right, like, you know, to cry on somebody's shoulder, to, you know, and to let all that out. And so that has been such a gift to me.
My brother coined a term a few weeks ago that I loved. I put it on the Killing Superwoman Instagram, I think, brave space. Because his thought was, we say we want to hold safe spaces for people, but you can't guarantee safety because you can't control other people's behaviors. But what we can do is create spaces where people can be brave. Because it takes what you just described about the vulnerability and being able to lay down the armor, even in the context of a marriage, it takes a level of bravery to be able to do that. Right. And so when you create a brave space for people, you actually give permission to lay it all down and just be.
Right.
Well, and I think for our kids too. So, sorry, even for you know, Eden, my oldest, came to me and she was like, you know, my kids are in competitive gymnastics. She's like, you know, I really don't want to do this anymore. And I said, well, let's talk about it. She said, you know, I feel like, you know, I don't have to prove anything to anybody, and I'm good no matter what I do. I don't have to be the gymnastics girl. And I thought, yay, I did at least one thing right in raising this kid, right?
Right.
That's awesome.
What were you going to say, Sean?
I was just going to say, like, piggybacking off of Rashida, there's this notion of vulnerability is weakness. It is not for the weak.
No, it is not.
A lot of strength, right? Yes. And I think going back to the Superwoman notion, right? Like the notion that Superwoman is the embodiment of all of this strength, sure, by certain metrics, but it is oftentimes missing that, like, vulnerability piece, right? Like, either because we feel like we can't afford to stop, or that we feel like that is the expectation. And so we're striving to meet this standard. And it's hard to get someone to break away from that when this, you know, we talked about this in the first episode, like, this looks like success. So no one really, you know, like, those close to you might step in and pull you aside and rein you back in. But society at large is going to be like, nope, you are checking the boxes. Like, look at that. Like, that is exactly right. That's exactly what we wanted from you. Keep it coming. Right. And the other thing is, some folks who even care about you aren't going to step in and pull you aside because they have a vested interest in you continuing to do all of those things, because if you don't do it, sure, there's someone else who can, but it requires them to step up and meet that challenge. So it's like, well, as long as you're okay, I'll let you ride, you know, and we'll worry about that bridge when we get to it. So,
but I think all of those things are true. And what I have found, as with anything else, is when you really start to talk to people and when you really start to have conversations, even those people who may not have said to you, like, I'm a little concerned, right? They're concerned about their own selves. And that's the, like, that's the impetus for why I wanted the Killing Superwoman community to be what it was, a community, what it is.
I need you to talk about that a little bit for our viewership, because they don't know exactly what Killing Superwoman is.
So Killing Superwoman came from an idea that I had literally driving in my car one day, and just thinking about kind of all of the things that I've been through. So for all of our listeners, because we haven't, like, I went through a very ugly divorce. It took almost 4 years. It was an emotionally and verbally abusive situation. We have a beautiful child out of it. And I've done a lot of the work over the years with my therapist, with prayer. I believe in Jesus and therapy. And with my friends and the support system and family to be who I am, who I believe I am supposed to be at this moment in time. And a lot of that came from letting go of expectations of myself. I had my own expectations of who I should be as a wife and what that looked like, and didn't necessarily live up to those expectations. I felt like other people put expectations on me and what I should be and where I should be in my life. And I slowly shed those. And it's a constant process. It's not a complete process. I don't think it's ever done. But as I was driving and just sort of thinking back on, like, wow, how far have I come? Like, it was like, you're killing this concept of Superwoman. And so I created this online community that I wanted to be brave space. I wanted to be private. I didn't want it linked to all of your other social media, because I believe that in order for us to all travel down this journey, you have to do that in community. You can't do it isolated. Sometimes things that you have gone through, nobody in your circle has gone through, and that doesn't make anyone bad or wrong. It just means you need to talk to someone who's been down that path. The people that helped me most when I was going through my divorce were the people who had been there, done that, and could identify with the nerves that I had every time I had to go to court, even though I'm a lawyer and I shouldn't be nervous about that in theory, right? Like, that's the expectation, but that's not the reality. And so I wanted to have and have created a place where other women, particularly Black women, can come and break this mold and really build each other up and support each other. Like, it's not a self-help book. That's not what the community is. It's really designed to be like, let's talk. Whatever you got going on, like, come in and talk and share and be supported and not have judgment. And if you need help with something, like, let's figure that out together. And the tagline is like, let's do life together, because that's how we all get better. In plug.
Love it. Love it. Bravo. It's
include info in the show notes.
We will include info.
Yes, please include info in the show notes. And I think, I love, as you were talking, what I wrote down on my paper here was perfection is the safe play. Perfection is the safe play. Strength is the safe play. Invincibility is the safe play. But there's no growth in that. No. There's no evolution in that. There's no nuance in any of that. And, you know, it's, oh, where is the quote? I just was watching A Wrinkle in Time last night, and there was a Rumi quote that one of the Who's, Mrs. Who said, one of those women said, the cracks are where the light comes in.
Yes.
Right?
Everything has a crack in it. Lets the light in. Yeah.
And we want to pretend like we don't have cracks.
We got all of them.
Yeah. But that's the beautiful thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, perfection is boring.
Yeah.
And it's only the safe play depending on how far you plan to go, because it has limitations. And, you know, like Sheila was saying, like eventually, like it can only get you so far.
Right.
So at some point, either you have to stop right where you are, or you get stopped, you know. Or
Yeah.
if you want to continue to go on, you've got to be able to adapt and to change and to push.
Well, and you don't learn imperfection. You learn from failures, from mistakes.
Yeah.
I've adopted this mantra of no regrets, lessons learned.
Mm-hmm.
Because what's the point of regretting something that's happened, right? It's done. It happened. You can't change it. You can't go back. And if you did, like, what if you change that? You see all the movies where like they go back and they try to change something, and then like all these people disappear.
Right. Butterfly effects.
Right. And so it's like, okay, so you go back and then what?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't learn. You're no longer learning from that. And life is what's your term, Nicole? Like, life is a beautifully messy journey.
Mm-hmm. It's really hot and messy for me.
It is hot. Oh, and messy. Hot.
But it's great. It's great. And it's it is to quote Hamilton, how lucky we are to be alive right now. I mean, this is an amazing time. It's and the funny thing about it is, like, real quick, there's that clip going around. I don't know the woman's name, Jane somebody or another, who's the white woman who's the anti-racist, and she's in a group of people, and she has people raise their hand, white people raise their hand, would you want to be black? And none of them raise their hand, but I'm like, I wouldn't want to be anything else.
I love it.
I love it. I love the depth of experience and I love our inheritance.
Right.
Black women. I do.
Yeah.
Well, right. I was going to say, and like taking it a step further, like I specifically love being a Black woman.
Yeah.
So.
I think there is so much that comes with it, and you see it not just in us, but we see it in our kids, and we see it in what they're doing, and you see them take what we've made and take it to the next level. Like, can we talk for a minute about our thirdness today?
Plug number 2.
Plug number 2.
Yes.
Nicole.
Unplug 2. Yes. So these are No Limit Hope t-shirts for the people. My youngest, Hope, who is
how old?
7.
Yes.
She is my tiny CEO. She is an absolute dynamo. She is a force. And we had been watching some programming that was focused on the recent events around sort of, the unrest in the country related to race relations. And she said, Mommy, I really want to do something. I want to help. And who am I to deny the child the opportunity to do that? And so we came up with the idea to do t-shirts. No Limit Hope was our slogan that we came up with, obviously a play on her name. And that we would give at least half of the proceeds to Black Lives Matter. And so we've gotten an amazing response from friends and family, and she's loving it. She's learning a lot, but also, not just, how to kind of like start a little business, but that each of us in our own way, no matter how small, can make a difference.
Yeah. And I love my shirt. And I got one for Bear too, because we got them in kid sizes.
Yeah, we do. And so we'll put that in the show notes. And in fact, we are making our next big order today. So we may even have some additional merch available. So stay tuned.
Yeah.
Well, ladies, I think this has been a great episode. What do you
This
think?
has been a great episode. I always love how y'all challenge me in things that I think about. So I appreciate it.
Ditto.
Thank you.
All right.
Us the thirds. We
Oh.
out.
See y'all next time.